Welcome to another episode of Mafia Family Ties, brought to you by William Mattar Law Offices. With me today, I have the one and only Vic Carucci. Vic, thank you so much for being a part of it today.
It's great to be here. Yeah, it's long overdue. I know we talked about doing this for a bunch of months, I think, if not years. But certainly it was just getting schedules to work out, and I'm happy to be here.
That's awesome. I think I first met you, 10 or 12 years ago at a Fred Smirlis event.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Niagara Falls.
Niagara Falls, yeah.
Yes,
At the
absolutely. In fact, I still have the there was a hoodie shirt, and I know I told you about this. My favorite shirt. I mean, probably should have worn it today, but it's that hoodie style, light fit. I don't know where you got it, but and of course with Freddie's image on it frame outline was fantastic.
Yeah, Fred knows best.
Fred knows best.
Yeah. You still keep in touch with Fred?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. We talk probably weekly. It's so funny how the transformation. I mean, these relationships evolve, and when you're covering a team, when the player or coach or whoever is on that team and playing, it's a different vibe and a whole different relationship. It should be an arm's length sort of thing where, it's understood that if you're doing the job right as a journalist, things you write or say are not always going to be positive if you're telling the truth. And I don't mean personally vindictive. I loathe that. I know that happens, but I'm talking about just honest criticism of performance of the whole. It is a performance business, obviously, and a win-loss business. So you'll have your ups and downs in those relationships. And you mentioned Fred because we're contemporaries. We're the same age. That group of Bills that I covered, it was my group in terms of the demographic. Far different today, of course. These players are younger than my own children, so that happens when you stay.
Mine too now.
when you
my
stay
children
in
too.
this business this long, but when they're done playing, and when you've developed a lot of, you find these natural points of relationship of relating to each other. Then it turns into a friendship. Mm-hmm. And so, I think of Thurman Thomas, how many mean mugs he gave me, especially Miami week or something I wrote about Andre Reed, Bruce Smith, Fred. But after a while, it's like, hey, we grew up together, kind of me covering them playing. And it's a whole different feeling, a fun feeling. Some hold hard feelings. I'm not going to lie. There's some people who probably won't, stop talking to me when I was covering them, and I'm not sure we're going to have a chat anytime soon. But that happens.
That's wild. Yeah. So you covered the Bills. You were like the beat reporter for the Buffalo News,
right?
From when until when? It was in the 80s when you started.
So I started covering the NFL in South Jersey, covering the Philadelphia Eagles in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. That is even though it's a different state, a suburb of Philadelphia, basically, right across the Delaware. And that was my first big time job out of school. I wasn't hired to cover them. I was hired to cover college sports. It was a Gannett newspaper, and the Gannett chain, that is where I started in Central New York. I was, again, covering high school, doing everything, covering high schools, layouts, editing, you name it. But the opportunity to cover what was big time college sports down there was just, to me, like a slice of heaven. And the beat was Penn State for football. Penn State, which was still a 5-hour drive from where I was, but that was there. It was Villanova when they were a D1 school. Howie Long, I covered Howie Long when he was playing at Villanova. University of Maryland was in my realm, my beat, and then of course all the and Temple and Penn, and it was football, and then of course Big Five basketball. LaSalle, St. Joe's. It was really an amazing time to be covering sports. And I'm single, and I know nothing except work, eat, sleep. because you can do that when you're, and I wasn't the greatest spiffiest guy. And then I would be on, I'm probably still not, but when my wife would, and I'd cover a little of everything. My wife now, when we were dating then, and I got on the 76ers beat for a time because the beat writer there got ill. I was just put Vic here, and I'm covering the Sixers, and they ended up going to the finals that year against the Lakers. It was Magic Johnson's rookie year, and I'm covering Julius Erving, Daryl Dawkins, and the Philadelphia 76ers. Well, CBS would cover those games, especially the postseason. I mean, all of them, but on those Sundays, I'd be sitting at courtside in like a flannel shirt or something, and now there was no texting me to tell me what a dork I looked like. We talk on the phone, like, you got to do something about that blue flannel, thing, or that red flannel. We got to change this over. So on one of her trips down to South Jersey, she took care of that. But yeah, then I got the Eagles beat. Wasn't ready for that at all. Was way over my head covering the Eagles. Ron Jaworski, Lackawanna native, was quarterback. Dick Vermeil was the head coach. And then 1982, the opportunity, and the story with this, so it's the NFC Championship game in Philly. Eagles are playing Dallas. The Eagles would beat Dallas and go on to the Super Bowl. Larry Felser, the late great columnist for the Buffalo News, legend. He's at the game. Well, Larry wrote for the Sporting News, an NFL column for them. And he was, to me, just this godlike national hero. And I'd never seen him in person. And he's in the press box now. Because, again, this is the NFC Championship game, so it's being covered by football writers all over the country. And I see him there, and I introduce myself. And I say, Mr. Felser, if there was ever an opportunity for me to cover the Bills, to come back, because at that point, I was married. My wife and I we're both from Central New York, and we were talking about just getting maybe back to New York State. And I said, if that ever came up, I would really be interested in that. And he looks at me and he goes, so let me ask you, are you just saying that to impress me, or do you mean that? I said, I mean it. I was like, it caught me way off guard. And that led to the opportunity to join the Buffalo News in 1982 and cover the Bills.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's the whole origin story right there. And Larry Felser weaved in there as well too.
And a mentor, and not just just professionally. I mean, doing the job of covering a team and learning from him. I mean, and again, at that point, you've got to be ready. I mean, you're stepping into a big role covering the NFL, but I still needed that guidance and relied upon his and the history that he had from covering the Bills from the very beginning. But also life lessons. He's a dad. He had 2 daughters. I end up being a dad with 2 daughters. And I feel in many ways the model of how to be a husband, a dad, a person in the community. He would always say, when we go to these press boxes around the country, talk about dress code, look professional. Don't wear the blue flannel. Don't wear the blue flannel. Wear a jacket, tie, and because you're representing not just yourself and not just the Buffalo News, but Buffalo. And that always stayed with me.
No, that's awesome. Great advice. Great advice. So you covered them all through the lead up to the Super Bowl, through the Super Bowl years. Yeah. When did you finish covering them as the big reporter?
Covered all 4 Super Bowls, that whole run. And I finished my last year, so 1999, I got an opportunity, and it was, this was something that it kind of came out of the blue, but when I saw it, I said, I've really got to pursue this. It was a chance to become, the title was national editor for a publication that was called NFL Insider Magazine. And the league, it was going to be a league publication. They were doing a national search for this role. And I know some of the people who interviewed included Peter King, names you'd recognize, John Clayton, all top legendary people in this business and great friends. And and I interviewed as well, and I got the gig. What I didn't know that the gig would include to the degree that it became was NFL.com, because the print, obviously doing the print thing was fine, but it was the print thing. There was an evolution happening at that point, again, the late 90s of digital. And that was when I told folks I was doing that, I was going to be doing this NFL.com column. They said, you're leaving, the security and sanctity of the newspaper business to do this .com thing. Are you crazy?
This internet thing will never take off.
Like how could I said, well, the only thing that I mean, certainly I'd listen to that advice, but I'd say to myself or to them, it's the NFL brand. And even though it's still at that point was not what it is, what we know it to be now in terms of enormity, it's pretty big. But I said, the NFL, I think it can sustain itself. I just think this is this has enough traction and enough interest and eyeballs. And I remember us starting, like there's a chart, a flow chart that I kept that the league put together. It had us at 25,000 users in the very early days. And then it would jump to 850 million or whatever. And it was crazy. And it was quite an experience. And at that point I was doing, so when I did this job, it was sometimes long features where you could spend time, like Jim Haslett, who I'd covered as a player, was head coach in New Orleans, and it was, hang out with a head coach for a week. And I did, and our relationship helped me, he gave me a spot in his office for the week so I could observe and listen and be the proverbial fly on the wall and do that piece and various others. And then for the website, it was, weekly, or I should say, thrice weekly columns and traveling to games everywhere and basically being on the road a minimum of 3 days a week. And then our headquarters at the time for editorial was, there was certainly a base on Park Avenue, league headquarters in New York, but the editorial group was in LA. Eventually this would migrate over to what would be NFL Network. And so it was trips to LA for editorial meetings, trips to New York for editorial meetings. And Roger Goodell, who I first met in 1982 when I was my first year on the beat of the Buffalo News, when I was walking up to get my credential for the NFC Championship game, it was in Washington. It was the 49ers and then Redskins. The guy who handed me my credential, and he sees my affiliate, Buffalo, and he goes, I'm from Jamestown. It was Roger handing me the credential, intern for the league. Yeah. And the guy in front of me in the line who was complaining about not getting enough credentials. He said, what do you mean we're only getting 6? We got to get a lot more than 6. We need at least 12 credentials. And he's got this booming voice and he's really agitated, and we're just shrugging. I'm just there to get my credential, cover the game and move on. That guy was Chris Berman. And ESPN was, still not, it wasn't what we know ESPN to be, but they were growing. And now I would say on average, they probably get 300 credentials to any game, even ones that they're not
even using.
Not broadcasting. And they're going to be doing their first Super Bowl. And I'll just to tell you how that evolution worked. But it's fascinating to see how far from that moment, what that moment meant. And Roger, to his credit, would always keep Buffalo in his sights in a good way. And we had many a conversation before when he was like deputy commissioner and when the stadium did its first retrofit right in that late 90s area and the business backs the bills, if you remember that, all the effort.
Doug Flutie and everything.
Yes, Erky Kilborn and Doug and, it was so all those memories come rushing back. But did the NFL.com thing for a whole bunch of years and then was able to simultaneously, I had 2 stints with the Cleveland Browns. First was to bring them up to speed, improve their website, and we created a publication. I forget, it was called Browns Digest. I guess it wasn't Browns Digest. It had a name. Anyway, it was an insert to the Cleveland Plain Dealer, the model, a Browns Huddle. And the model of it was something that was really, I didn't come up with it, but some really bright business person, because we looked at mail distribution and all this and all the costs. And, now I'm getting into things that are just blowing my mind. I'm a writer guy. I interview, I do this. Now there's the business side to this, and I'm learning this on the fly, and it was fascinating. But somebody, I think the person worked either for the Plain Dealer or for the Browns, or they collaborated. How about we insert it into certain editions of the newspaper, do a collab with the newspaper, and it'll get strong distribution to, it wouldn't be out of town, but you'd have enough population in Cleveland that would want it, as bad as the Browns were then and continue to be. And it was fascinating to see that, grow. And then on my second stint with the Browns, I helped launch a radio show called Cleveland Browns Daily. And I was first host of it, and it emanated from the facility and aired on WKNR, the ESPN affiliate in Cleveland. That became a model that the Bills would use for the John Murphy show that would evolve into One Bills Live. Houston Texans for their show. I mean, teams around the league, because that's what the NFL is. It's partnerships, owners partner. Yeah, they're competitors, but business partnerships, best practices, and that's what working for a team really showed me, that side of the league that you don't necessarily see from the outside. It's not that the teams necessarily love the league. There's a lot that they can dislike about any number of things, and Bills fans know that when it comes to whatever, officiating, you name it. But I heard the same conversations from inside the Browns, but seeing it from the inside was such an eye-opener.
Well, you've really had like a front row seat. You're talking about like back in '82 coming to Buffalo, and even before that, and then into NFL.com and your work with Sirius Radio and everything. You've really had a front row seat to watching the NFL come from like just one of the four leagues to people always talk about how the Vatican is its own country.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like the NFL is along those lines. Like it's such a monolith.
It really is. And Sirius XM NFL Radio was another opportunity that came along in 2004 when the channel signed on. And you had Sirius and you had XM. You had two satellite companies. They would merge. And I was part of that. Part of Sirius, because they had the NFL rights, and they still do. And I've done a show with them. I'm one of their longest running co-hosts, and that's been amazing. I do that from my home. Or you could do it portably from pretty much anywhere, but mostly from my home office here. And when I was in Cleveland, I still did the show, but you're not covering the team that you cover. You're covering the league, and you got to be up to speed as much as you can on the entire league. It requires a lot of homework and a lot of digging. And this is Thursday, so I've spent a good portion of this week preparing for the Saturday show that I co-host with Dan Leberfeld, who's around the Jets. He publishes it's called Jets Confidential. And he's been a long time observer of the league, and it's a blast to do that show, to get the different perspectives and the reach. I think there's like 40 million subscribers to Sirius. Not that they're all listening to our show at the same time, but you're in the millions whenever you're on, and it's as you said, the monolith, the growth. The brand, and we've seen it here. I mean, this is a small market, no question. And I still, as it's grown and as it's become what it's become, I continue to say and people should really bow to that statue of Ralph Wilson that is at the stadium, and I had great rapport with him, even though it had its many ups and downs. But at the end of the day, a mutual respect. But that man bringing this team to this market, back in 59, 60, it's not happening at all in a market like this, given the growth of the league. Now they've come up to speed in many ways, and we're going to see how a new stadium sort of addresses that, because the idea of this new stadium in so many ways is to bring the Bills up to the level of what the rest of the league is. And this is a different market. This isn't, from a resource finance standpoint. And what does it look like with fans? Who are you pricing out, and who are you pricing in?
Yeah, yeah. There's so many factors that have been put into that stadium. Have you been in there yet?
I have not toured. I missed the media tour. I had other things going on. I hope to get the chance to see it soon. I have also collaborated with my younger daughter on club seats. We got 4 between us. I don't know if I'll ever sit in them. They're really meant for our family and friends, who will use them. But my wife talked me into that, and I caught me at a weak moment. It was the Friday morning after, I think, the Miami Thursday night game, and I was groggy. It was late night, working, and all right, let's just get him in. And I realized,
here's the card, just run it.
Wait, this. PS what?
Yeah, once a month I'm like, how did my credit card?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the bills, right?
But it's wild. All good, and it's investment. I mean, in all seriousness, the 30-year, I think of it as the 30-year commitment of lease and all that. And obviously from the video we saw on the inside, but even from the outside, it's a majestic, incredible looking thing. I mean, it's ours. It's here. It's in this community. And I think more long term of my grandchildren who are, at least here now. I mean, growing up here now, we'll see what the future brings. But to be part of this, I grew up in Central New York. I didn't grow up with major league franchises, in the backyard, so to speak, like we have with the Bills, like you have with the Sabres, and it's special, and that's what I always, when my kids were born. Now, my 2 daughters, can take or leave sports generally. You take them to the Pro Bowl. Like we'd go. NFL would send me every year at NFL.com when it was in Hawaii, and we'd take our daughters sometimes, and they'd be in Aloha Stadium with coloring books. Well, and I'd say, that's Jerry Rice down there, and that's this guy and that. Yeah, Dad. Okay, and they're and all they cared about was the swimming pool and doing hula stuff and all that with instructors and it was a fun. Those were fun experiences, but the idea of football as I now I got grandsons now, and they're starting to get it. Like 8-year-old, 7-year-old, they are trading cards. I had all these old cards that were my wife pulled out of the basement, and he's the 3rd youngest grandchild, but he's been fascinated by them. And he decided Andre Reed is his favorite Bills player of the 90s. And he just brought that up randomly. His favorite current Bill, now everybody's Josh Allen. He's Khalil Shakur. He's all about Shakur. And he wants to wear number 10 when he plays flag football and all.
Both receivers, big yards after the catch guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe that's his.
Maybe that's where he's seeing.
That's gonna be his thing. So so touching on the stadium, thinking about the fans a little bit. So the fans have been through a lot in the period between like '99. When is that when you left? You said was it 99?
99 is when I left the beat at the Buffalo News, and I would I returned back in 2014 after the Browns, after the stints with the Browns. I did come, and NFL.com. I did come back to the to Buffalo, but 99 and left is a relative term. We kept our home here. Right. I had a condo in right behind the Browns facility, in fact, in Middleburg Heights, Ohio, because I could walk to work. It was great.
Not too bad. So, but they, the fans went through a lot during that drought, and having your home here, seeing it all firsthand, and obviously even when you were doing the NFL.com and Sirius, like you're still very much in touch with what's going on in Buffalo. So, what are some of the things that you think about with the fan base in terms of how fans were able to stick it out through that whole drought? Because there really wasn't that much of a lull in terms of enthusiasm,
right?
So what do you think makes this fan base different?
Well, the obvious part is you're right. Still having some connection with the team through the drought. Now, attendance, it's a bottom line business. So when you don't see those numbers, you're not seeing the revenue. You're seeing reasons why just as they did with Ralph Wilson, when season tickets had plummeted down to like 13,000, I believe was the number, and he's standing next to me. This was in the off season of 1986. Okay, and the like OTA time, Mother's Day, that area, and we're standing side by side, and he's looking around the stadium with about 11 to 13, I think it was about 13,000 season tickets at the time. Think about that, at a stadium that at the time was holding at least 80,000. Yeah. And he said, I just don't know if professional football is still viable in Buffalo. Now, some of that is...
They weren't playing professional football, though.
They were awful. No, they had 2 and 14 seasons in 84 and 85. I covered those. Just atrocious. The quarterback carousel was ridiculous. Everything... As Bill Polian, who was not the GM at the time, he was a sort of a de facto GM, but working in personnel, and actually secretly, because Kay Stevenson brought him in, had him on the payroll in some form. I don't know what the line item was, but he had this little closet office, Bill, and I discovered him. I said, who are you and what are you doing? And we're looking at he's showing me all these charts and such as he's evaluating. He goes, this team is 2 and 14 on merit. I mean, they just don't have any players. Mm-hmm. And he's breaking down all that they lack. So Ralph, I know you've asked me about the drought, but I just want to add this, that Ralph said, so are we viable, whatever. Well, in August of 86, what happened? They got this guy named Jim Kelly from the USFL, and that changed everything, of course. And now suddenly it's 50,000 or whatever the number jumped to, because everybody had to have a piece of that. Now they still weren't great. I think they'd only won 4 games or whatever that year. And then going from again, Hank Bola to Kay Stevenson, Hank Bola, Marv Levy as coaches, and you could see how this thing was tracking. But as the roster was being put together, as Thurman is coming aboard and Cornelius Bennett is coming aboard, you got Bruce Smith already, you got Andre Reed, and then Frank Reich is there as an incredible backup, not only for what he did incredibly in filling in for Jim, but the coach and shoulder pads that he was for Jim, and Ken Hall, and you could see all of that dynamic coming together in the drought period. They were lacking. Once again, they had reverted to this team that had no rudder, no compass. It was dysfunctional in every possible way, and everything was bad from coaching on down, leadership on down, GM on down, and it wasn't clicking. Obviously, yes, the fans endured to a great degree, but the thing that I was making fun of this, and I know this won't make me popular with folks, but the jumping through tables and all the stuff that was happening pregame or happening away from the stadium, to me was simply whatever's going on inside that place isn't worth watching. So we're going to make our own fun out here, and we're going to use the game as an excuse to get together, drink a lot, and jump on tables and look silly, and whatever else goes with that, and spin on a bat and puke, whatever. And to me, all that says is, okay, why don't we do this? And I'll invest in a parking lot somewhere, and maybe invite everybody to come over, and I'll supply some alcohol or whatever, and then you guys can just have your jumping party here, because the game doesn't matter to you. I say that facetiously, but it also angered me, the thought that you've got this team, and yes, this team isn't doing you any favors, so you're going to return the favor by clowning to the point where the reputation before pre-Josh Allen, pre-success, pre-Sean McDermott, pre-9 seasons of really good football that we've seen these last 9 seasons, or pretty good to really good, is about that. Yeah. It's about this fan base that just, this is what they do. And yes, it's celebrated, and yes, it's taken on a life of its own, and we'll see where it all kind of goes from here. But once it became a real football team to watch and support and have the success, sure, I know tables got broken, but those same folks, if they could walk afterward, were walking into the stadium to see some good football.